So we're gonna talk about Vaal Righteous Fire. This is a skill which makes damage based on how much life and energy shield you have left. We are a life build, so it bases off our life. There are a couple of things you need to know about this setup. It is dangerous, so if you use it incorrectly, you might die. Because if you miss your target and don't leech, your Vaal Righteous Fire will bring you down to 1 life. And after that you're a one-shot. It also requires a gear switch if you don't want to run around with this chest all the time, which I don't recommend, it's pretty boring. It reduces your clear speed. Then there's also a fail risk. Maybe you used your Vaal Righteous Fire, but you didn't use it. You didn't do all the things that are required to get a maximum hit damage. Then you've used your Vaal Righteous Fire, and you might need to switch to another. Now, a good upside is that they need very few souls compared to other skills. In really hard maps like Guardian maps with nasty mods, I bring 4 with me. The level doesn't matter so much on the others, I have 1 really good and then some other not so good. So I know that I can win the battle sooner or later because I have 4 chances to succeed. I'm gonna show you 3 clips and I'm gonna comment on them. So the first one is a Rigwald. It's a lair map. It's pretty dangerous overall. Many have died to this boss with this build and many other builds because it has some complex mechanics. And I want to show the one shot. Now I changed to a Minotaur setup because it increases my Vaal Righteous Fire setup damage. In this particular case, I did switch to the chest plate. This is how it works. In the beginning of the map, I put on my chest plate with a Vaal Righteous Fire. I go and kill maybe a pack or 2, and it's loaded up. When I notice that, I switch to my normal chest setup and it's a bit faster for clearing. Alright. So then I come to the boss and I've cleared everything and I switch back to the chest plate. So yeah, there I've switched back. So what I did there is I walked through a pack to get my elemental overload, which increases my damage, and ignite myself, which makes me take more damage from Eye of Innocence. Okay. Then I walk Queen to Rigwald. I try to prolong by walking around a bit more. And there I did my one shot. He died. You have a very, very small window of succession here. Because here he's immune because he's speaking. There you have your chance to one-shot him. And I take it. In order for this to succeed, you need to have your Vectors on or him shocked. You can have a Vaal Lightning Trap. You need to have your Elemental Overload. One thing that can increase the damage even more is having a weapon switch, which I'll talk about more later, but I didn't have it in this case. Now I want to move on to Beacon. Now Beacon has many small bosses, so it's hard to hit them with a concentrated effect. So what I do instead is I take an increased AoE. But what I want is my Elemental Overload, and that is enough to kill everything. Now the rest of the mobs there are just some trash mobs left over. So that's the Beacon. Increased AoE is enough to one-shot those. Now, tier 16 is a whole other story. These bosses have, I would say, maybe between 10 and 15 million HP. I think Minotaur has maybe close to 15 million HP. I've switched in my Vaal Righteous Fire. Here I run in, take some hits, activate flasks, I do now, do a weapon switch, and then Vaal Righteous Fire. That's a one shot. So if we go into reverse, what did I do actually? So I take my Quicksilver to walk to him quickly, because if we have a distance there's a risk that he will dive and do his burrow attack. And it has the potential, if we're unfortunate, to one-shot us if we have nasty mods and such. So we walk to him, and this makes it in the way that he does a default attack or something, or a swing. Then we press our Druid's Elixir, which triggers our cast when damage taken setups, give us some charges. Very useful. Then I've also activated my Fortify with Cyclone. And by running around, I have activated Elemental Overload. I have ignited myself. So now I make my weapon switch. I think it was made there. I press all my flasks. Yeah, it is weapon switched. There are now 2 Dorianis Catalysts. And I do my one shot. He burns down in, I would say, about 3 seconds. So this is where it starts, 17 seconds in. We have 3 seconds left on our flasks. And then I do the hit. And he's dead at 20 seconds. We have 1 second left on the flask. So between 2 and 3 seconds he dies. The ignite duration is for 4 seconds. So we have a damage potential of doing 30% over his life in one hit. The thing to notice also here is that I move out of his circle of raining stones. Now this is a risk. There's a risk of him burrowing down and attacking me. But I did this slowly. So now I'm outside of this. There's no risk that I take damage from these. So this increases my chance of having full life when Vaal Righteous firing. So this is what you want to do. Now Hydra has a lower amount of life pool than Minotaur, but because it's a harder boss to align all of those things I just showed, I've actually not succeeded to one-shot it. It always is like 2 shots. I've maybe done a 1-shot which takes it down to 10% left or 20% left, but yeah, it's always been a 2-shot. So there are bosses you don't want to use this mechanics on, the Vaal Righteous Fire. Colosseum is one example. Here we start the fight, we go in, we do a Vaal Righteous Fire. Okay. But he goes into next phase. Now, standing here, there's a risk you'll stand with the blades, you take damage, and you can die and everything. But I didn't. Okay, he attacks me. I want to Vaal Righteous Fire. Now, this is a very good take-home message. Bosses that can move very quickly away from you. There are a couple of examples. He is one example. Merveil is one other example. If you're like, maybe have temporal chains on yourself or something, you don't have time to react. And casting Vaal Righteous Fire is pretty slow. So here we are in distance, we pop our Vaal Righteous Fire, but he's already whirled away. So we go down to 1 life. We didn't see that because we had something hit him at the same time. So we went up to 2k and then full life again. But that was a Vaal Righteous Fire miss. So I just cyclone for, what was that, 5 seconds? Maybe, no, not even that, maybe 4 seconds. And it took him down. So why do I want to make a Vaal Righteous Fire? To save like 1 second? It's not worth it. So don't do it on these kinds of bosses that have many phases and that are dangerous. Now Chimera is another story. I succeeded on first try, deathless of course. I one-shot every phase. It was pretty nice. But here you see a bit of the switching between. You have some kind of system, you take one at a time. You've loaded up all 4 during the map. You know, during the Guardian maps you can probably load up maybe 6-7 Vaal Righteous Fires. Now we want to move on to the Vaal Righteous Fire setup we use and how it works. Now we use the links Vaal Righteous Fire, Concentrated Effect, Control Destruction, Chance to Ignite, Fire Penetration. I have high quality on all of those because I really wanted to do that one-shot clip. That is not necessary, and my extra Vaal Righteous Fires aren't even really leveled. So yeah. The important part here is the weapon switch for taking down Guardians. I have my normal setup here, but I have a weapon switch with 2 Dorianis Catalysts. So 2 Dorianis Catalysts, they are high rolled, they maybe don't need to be this well rolled. Then I have Cyclone with Fortify. I have some kind of cast on damage taken set up to compensate for the fire burst loss. Okay, so you have your setup, and you want to kill the boss. So you walk into the boss with your normal setup, you walk around a bit, you want to switch to your alternative weapons when you get your elemental overload up and when you have self-ignited. And to do so, replace your increased area of effect on your Abberath Hooves with increased critical strikes, so you get your elemental overload up faster. Now, one thing that also can increase the speed you get it is by using Dwayer's Elixir, but if you use it too early, you might not have your Savaged Hit activated recently and you lose those 50% increased damage if you have taken a Savage Hit recently. What I would say is get your elemental overload up, then you press all your flasks, bam. You have them shocked for like 4.8 seconds, and you get a damage boost from overflowing shallows if you're using that. Dwayer's Elixir will have triggered all your spells, maybe they'll crit and everything. And you do your weapon switch and bam, you Vaal Righteous Fire it down. Low tier bosses, maybe even up to tier 15, you don't need to make the weapon switch, you don't even need Legacy Vinctors to take them down, mostly. Or not Legacy Vinctor at all, if it's Legacy or not doesn't matter. You can just keep your normal setup for safety and for the convenience. So you just walk in, get your elemental overload and then bam. I want to talk a bit about what increases your damage with your Vaal Righteous Fire. So we are Berserker, which means we get Aspect of Carnage, 40% more damage. This double dips. What does this mean? Well, it increases the initial hit with 40% damage, or it's 40 more. So if you did 100 damage before, you now do 140. Then you ignite the enemy, and the ignite damage you get will be 40% more because you increased the initial hit. But then you also have 40% more on the burn. You're gonna increase that 40% more again. That is what we call double dipping. The same goes for elemental overload. It's also more multiplier. The same goes for concentrated effect. It's also more multiplier. So these are gonna multiply with each other. You're gonna get 1.4 times 1.54, or 53 in this case, times 1.4. And then you're gonna do that again. These are not the only double dips. The Blasphemy has 2 curses affecting elemental resistance. Now resistance also double dips. It affects the initial hit and then the burning. So it's very powerful, but on bosses they only have 40% curse effectiveness. I've also gotten, of course, like fire damage on my ring. Mocha's Embrace gives fire damage. Eye of Innocence gives damage if you're ignited yourself. The fire damage from Abberath Hooves also double dips. It's not too much. Then you can, on your jewels, you can get like fire damage, area damage. Now, thanks to chance to ignite, here we have it, and our tree and our jewelry, we have around 100% chance to ignite with our flammability also, even when it's 40%. I think I have 97% or something. So mostly you will ignite. Now you might want to see how the damage is on this build. So with 7.5k life, Vaal Righteous Fire does 1.39 times your base life. Then you have Concentrate Effect, Control Destruction, Fire Pen. Fire Pen doesn't double dip. And then the Dual Curse, then the Berserker Multi, Elemental Overload. Then if you shock, that double dips as well, and it's a more multiplier. So if you're using Vinctors or Vaal Lightning Trap, you will do 50% more damage on the initial hit and then 50% more damage on the secondary burn. So it's a multiplier of 2.25 basically. Very, very powerful. And then all our fire and area, etc. damage will double dip as well. So the initial hit makes for about 500,000 damage. This is maybe like 5% or maybe like 3% of some Guardian's life pool. So it takes basically no damage. But thanks to all the double dipping, our secondary hit does, or our burn, does 4 million damage per second. This is not unreasonable. I think this is probably the truth. I've counted in the curse effectiveness and everything, and the dual cursing. And this is what we hit with Guardians with elemental resistance of 40%. So 4 million damage per second. And it is enough to one-shot the Guardians. Except, of course, Phoenix, it can't be ignited, but then we AFK'd it. So take a coffee break, let your character AFK it, and do something else in the meantime. I want to also mention that Abberath's Hooves, why I like this comboing with Vaal Righteous Fire, is that when you switch in this chest plate, of course it's not for a long time, but your build is still pretty good. Because your Abberath's Hooves are still active, so you still have your active skill. Now with other versions of a build, when you have another active setup, like cast when channeling within Incinerator Firestorm, when you switch out your chest plate, you lose your active attacks, so you will rely on things hitting you and killing themselves. It takes some longer time. But it still works greatly. It works really well. You should, however, run dual Mucus Embrace on those to compensate for the loss of ignite chance on Abberath's Hooves. So if you don't run Abberath's Hooves, have 2 Mucus Embrace when Vaal Righteous Firing. Other bosses that can't be ignited are Atziri. Her split faces can be ignited, so you can Vaal Righteous Fire those if you'd like to. The first Vaal bosses in the Atziri map, when you kill the first, the second gets enraged and it can't be ignited. So you have to ignite both at once if you want to die of that. Also the triple bosses in Atziri, I think in the last phase or the second phase, they get ignite immune. So you have to hit all 3 at once and ignite them so they all get one shot. Emberwake is a ring that can be used together with Taming in some versions of this build. But when it comes to Vaal Righteous Fire, don't use that combo because Emberwake makes your burn 5 times less potent. So your 4 million burn damage per second will go down to less than 1 million. That is terrible. For the Taming to compensate that damage loss, it has to go up to 300 ignites. That's not gonna happen. So don't use this combo when one-shotting with Vaal Righteous Fire. Instead use fire damage rings like Mucus and this together. Very good combo. So as you see, it's 4 off colors in a Belly of a Beast to get the 4 blue and 1 red. This is the setup you should run. Getting a 6 link doesn't really increase your damage more. So 5 link is perfect. If you go 6 link, you could have another Vaal Righteous Fire. But as you see, it's 4 off colors, and that is hard to hit. It's above 1000 crumbs. But you could, as I've mentioned earlier, buy a piece of crap 6 linked ES chestplate. This is a hybrid chestplate I just had in my stash. Then you use a deafening essence of greed, which rolls I think up to like 128 life or something. Then you get results like this, 125 life. Okay, you had 7.5k life with this setup, or actually with my real setup you'll have a bit more, 7.74k. Then I changed to this chestplate, you have 7.5k. So you lose a bit above 200 life. You'll still do a lot of damage, and then you'll have a very easy time to roll your sockets, and you can even fit 2 Vaal Righteous Fire in one. So you can have, okay, I failed with one, then I press the next one. You don't have to do the switching, which is maybe not so convenient for everyone. Getting a chestplate like this, as mentioned before, will cost you like 25 chaos if the 6th link is 20 chaos and the essence of greed is 5 chaos. This is a great way of reducing the price. So actually the Vaal Righteous Fire setup doesn't have to be expensive at all. You don't need the Abberath's Hooves, it's very doable without them. And you don't need the Belly of the Beast setup I ran, but you can do it like this. And then it's just an additional like 25 chaos plus the gems to run the one-shot mechanics of Vaal Righteous Fire. And I think it's really worth it. I think everyone should try it out. Except if you're playing hardcore maybe.